Hi everyone, so this is going to be a tutorial on basically sort of like a video response to some people asking me about setting up iPhone and Android touch control for the mobile phones, tablets, etc. And this is based on the control setup in my Unity Driveable Vehicle tutorial, which is what you're seeing on the screen here right in front of you. I downloaded the exact same tutorial that you guys see, so that I would basically be starting where you guys are from. And I also have like 4 textures that I've just put together. You can find your own for turn buttons and brake pedal and gas pedal. So basically what I'm going to do with that is game object, create other GUI texture. Some things though, first off, on these textures, I went in and I set each one, by default they're set to texture, I set each one to GUI. I set each one to true color, not compressed, and I know that they're not more than 128 pixels in size each one, so I did all that. Make sure all of yours are GUI elements and not compressed. And basically, when I pull a GUI texture in, I remove all of the pixel inset values right there, and I move it via just the position transforms that way. And also to tweak kind of the opacity of it, if it's too intense, as I go in here and kind of lower it that way, kind of make it semi-opaque. So that's what you'd want to do, and you'd want to bring in all of your GUI textures and position them using those techniques wherever you want them in the screen. If you want them up here, top, bottom, depending on your screen resolution and aspect ratio and all that. So we're not actually going to pull in a bunch of controls in this tutorial or even use them. As a precursor in this tutorial, I'm on a PC platform right here. I'm in a PC web player build. I don't have the iOS or the Android functionality, so we're not going to be able to test that. This doesn't work in the editor, but it works great on the phone. If you have the iOS license or whatever and you use Unity Remote, you can test it on your device and see it update in the Unity editor and all of that. So this works really well. It's tested. The script's going to work that you're going to put on, but you're going to need a device or Unity Remote to basically test it on somehow. We're not going to test it here today. So the script that we want to mess with is going to be the player car script. We're going to double click on that, and this is the one we're going to want to this is the one we're going to want to edit to set up our touch controls. So we're going to modify this script and we're going to add to it. So first thing we want to do is I would like to add the capability for brakes, because we have a brake pedal, gas pedal. We don't have braking capability in the PC tutorial I did. So we want to set up a couple variables so that we can plug in the back wheel colliders to the car. I want the brakes to be on the rear wheel colliders, and right now all we have are the 2 front ones. So I'm just going to copy that, paste it in, and I'm going to type in back left wheel and back right wheel. I'm going to hit Control S and save. Basically, we've just set up 2 public variable slots in there on the car to plug in these 2 wheel colliders from the car. So, excuse me. Now that we look in here at updates, just like we pulled in our front ones, we need to pull in our back ones. So you would go in here, here's left rear and right rear, and then they're plugged in those new variable slots there. So we're set up, that's proper. We're going to go back to our script, and we're going to go and add in our textures we want. And we're using GUI textures like I just created right here, brake pedal. Usually I'll go in here and I'll go game object, create empty. I'll reset it, and I'll write GUI elements, and then we'll just drag it in there. And this will be like our container for all of our GUI textures and all of that stuff. So it's easier for us to keep track of. So we want to add variables for these so we can plug them in. So we're going to go var and type of GUI texture. And there we go. And that is going to be for our gas button. Captain Obvious there, right? And then our brake button, and then left and right turn buttons. Now, more than likely, you're probably going to want to do accelerometer controls. We'll do that in a different tutorial. But for this tutorial example, we'll show you how to make buttons control things. So now we have our 4 variables for our GUI textures. Excuse me. When I click on the car, there they are. So we would just drag our brake button over, game object, create other, GUI texture. We'll pull it in there, and we'll drag gas pedal, and then so on. And let's just go ahead and create GUI textures for them. Right turn button, left turn button. I'm going to drag them into the GUI elements folder, and we'll left turn button, assign them. So there we go. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to group select them and turn them all off on the screen. But they're still there. They're still assignable here in the inspector. So our variables have shown up. It's a good time to save. Good time to save the script. Now the next thing we need to do are not going to be variables that we're going to mess with. And we're going to create one. This is actually going to be an internal variable. It's going to be like a switch for on and off, and the script's going to know, the car's going to know if this variable is on or off. So we're going to call this var motorInputTouch. We're going to make it an integer, and we're going to make it a value of 0. So now an integer is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, a whole number. No decimal points, no floating values. We're going to create another variable called BrakePower. And this one is going to be a float, and we'll give it a value of 200. Now a float is like a decimal point, and it has a lot more different range of values that you could do. Instead of just 0 to 1, a float will allow you to go from like 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, 1.1. So it'll allow you to kind of float in a range. So that's the difference with a float and an integer. And we're declaring the type here too. Sometimes with Unity script you could literally do this, and that's a valid variable, and it will use dynamic type inference, I think, where it tries to figure out what the variable is. But we're actually going to be safe for iOS and put our value type of the variable in there. So I'm going to save. So basically motorInputTouch is an on and off thing that says if a button's pressed down, there is an input going on with the touch input for the motor, turning the motor on and off. 0 is no gas at all. 1 is full 100% gas. BrakePower float is basically the intensity of the brakes. So if it's 0, we have no brakes applied to the wheel. And if this value becomes 200, then we have full 100% brakes on the wheels. This is why we added the 2 back wheel colliders here. We're going to use them later. We're going to use a value on them called brake torque. It's an attribute of the wheel collider. Motor torque is another attribute on the wheel collider, and they do what they sound like. They're motoring back and forth and braking. So, and steer angle is the other important attribute for, you guessed it, steering left and right. So, okay, what we want to do is we're done with variables for now. We're going to go down here before our functions start, and we're going to type in function, not that, awake, excuse me, and we're going to take our little gas button variable, and we're going to say when this scene wakes up, we're going to assign this gas button, we're going to identify it, is what we're going to do, because you're already assigning it in the inspector, but we just want to make sure that this guy is going to be completely found and recognized in the scene as it runs. So, okay, let me make sure I type that right. Okay, so function awake happens before function start and update. Update is a function that this just keeps occurring every frame as your game's running constantly. Function start is when the scene starts up and the time, delta time starts. That's the start. Function awake is when immediately when you hit the play button, the scene wakes up and starts pulling in all the assets. This happens first. So we want it to find these buttons before anything so that our buttons are ready and playable and work. So we say, all right, gas button, which was assigned up here as a GUI texture, is now going to be the same thing as or equal to this game object in the scene called gas pedal. And it's very important that your GUI texture is actually called gas pedal. It's actually called that name. So it's going to actually look for this physically. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell it in the scene where all of these are. The brake button, hold on, no, that's the right variable right there. The left turn button and the right turn button. And then we're going to put in here what its actual name is. And we'll try to do some copying and pasting. I don't know how much time on this we're saving. So left, and then this one, and we'll hit save. And we're going to go back in. Okay, we have an error. Let's double click that. Oh, typo. Typo, I should have seen it. It didn't turn blue in mono development, so Control S. Clear if it doesn't auto clear. There we go. And just make sure brake pedal, gas pedal, look at those, make sure they're, scoot this aside a little maybe, and just make sure they're named the same. Yep, they are. So when the scene wakes up, we're going to find all these objects right here, all our buttons and pedals, and we're going to get started. So here we want to actually start putting in, we're going to go inside of the update function, because this is happening every frame, and we want to test if our buttons are pressed or not pressed every single frame as we go. So we're going to put a bunch of spaces in the update, because this is the function where we want this to happen. And we're going to start putting in some mandatory code that Unity needs for the script to detect touches, you know, on an Android device or an iPhone device. And they have a pretty set couple of lines of code here that you have to write that are pretty universal for Android and iPhone. Just it's a variable looking for an input type of touches, and it's looking for multi-touch, you know, like kind of an infinite amount of touches. So let's make sure we got this right. 4 touch, so that's the variable touch. It's a touch. Nope, not in input touches. So there we go. We're set up to receive all of our touches. Put our first little bracket. We're going to say if, this is our first line of touch phase code, if the touch phase is equal to touch phase dot stationary. Alright, and that's what the two and symbols mean. It means and our gas button dot hit test touch, no, not capital, dot position, blah blah blah, and then we'll say motor input. I'm going to explain this in a second. This is just a lot to take on right now, but we'll just explain it, and then we'll close bracket out of it. Okay, so here we are. It's setting up the variable to contain all these different touches, the input as being touches. And we're saying, all right, so if the first phase of the touch is equal to a touch phase stationary, which is a type of button or touch on the screen that is held down, you know what I'm saying? It's not like a tap or, you know, a tap. But basically, it's a held down button. So touch phase stationary. So we say if that and the gas button hit test are true, then motor input touch equals 1. So basically, gas button hit test is taking our gas button, which is a GUI texture, and we're saying on that GUI texture hit test, which is hit test is an attribute of a GUI texture that detects a touch or a hit on the pixels of the texture. So it's pretty accurate. And it's saying, all right, well then that's the touch position wherever the hit test is on that GUI texture. So if we have our button finger down, and it's hit on the GUI texture that's called gas button, then hey, set that variable motor input touch to 1, which we put up here. Motor input touch, we made it an integer. It's 0, but we're going to turn it on and make it 1. Excuse me. So that's going to be an input that says, hey, boom, turn the motor on. If these two things are true, if the button's held down and if it's on the gas button GUI texture. So the next thing we want to do is put our alternate if it isn't. So we want to say, I'm going to copy this since I don't want to do a lot of typing. Except this one, instead of if, it's going to be else if touch phase stationary, and gas phase hit test. We don't need it to assign a touch position because it's going to be a release of the button. We're going to say that motor input touch is 0. So what happened here is, and this is the if for, hey, if it's touching the gas button and it's held down, that's true. Turn it to motor input touch to 1. Else if it's stationary and down and hit test on it. No, that's not right. Okay, I know why. The else is has a touch phase ended. No typo. So now we're saying else if that touch phase means it's ended, it's off of it, and it left the gas button, then turn motor input touch to 0, which means, hey, no motor for the car. So that's the if and the else if. The two conditions. Is it touching the button on the gas button, and is the finger off of the gas button, and no gas for the car. So we're actually going to copy, not all of that. We're actually just going to copy from there to there. Hit enter. Paste again. And we're going to do the same identical thing for the brake button. Good times, right? So instead over here, we're just going to go brake button. Make sure our GUI texture was named that. Yep, that's it, brake button. So we say brake button hit test, and we want to set this to not motor input touch because it's the brakes. We want to use our variable that we established earlier, BrakePower. And we're going to set the BrakePower to like 200. We're going to hit Control S and save. Go back up here and look, there's the variable BrakePower under motor input touch. Had a default value of 200, which means the brakes are on, the car's not going anywhere. So we're saying if the touch phase is stationary, down on the button, held down, and it's on the GUI texture called brake button, that's the position of the touch. And we're going to establish that BrakePower variable to turn into 200. It's already 200, but we're going to say, hey, it's 200 if that. Then we're going to say, let's go here. Whoa, bad pasting. We're going to say, and then else if, I forgot an indent there. We're going to say else if the touch phase is ended and the brake button hit test is ended, then we're going to go back to no brakes at all. So BrakePower 0. So this is basically the core of detecting on the GUI textures brake and gas. Now, the next thing we need to do is put in, let's actually copy all of this. We're going to put in our steering. Hit enter, paste it, fix that indentation. Okay. So basically, let me figure out where we are here. Okay. I'm going to delete that so I just know where I'm at, because there's a lot of if-elses here now. I just want to know where I'm at. Okay, so our first condition is going to be if you've hit that left turn button, right? Yes. So we'll say left turn button, hit test, and then we're going to go down here on the else and copy in left turn button, hit test, ended. And how do we want to say this? Okay. So we're saying here, if you hit the left turn button, what's going to happen? So we're going to say we want to do something with the wheel collider. So we're going to say front left wheel dot steer angle equals negative 15. And we don't just want to turn one wheel, only the front left wheel turns and the front right wheel stays straight. Your car's going to get jacked. So we want to turn the front right wheel too. So what we're saying here is if the touch is down on the button, and it's that left turn button GUI texture, which could be anywhere on the screen you've touched or whatever, you know. Let's turn it on. So if you touch this, uh-oh, got some errors, but I think I know what's going on with that. I think it's just because we need another bracket in there. Yeah, not a problem. Okay, so if you touch this, which it would be over here somewhere or whatever, then let's go look at some things here and kind of see what the heck would be going on. There's left front wheel collider. And the wheel collider steer angle would really, well, it turns it locally around its own pivot, but it would turn that wheel. So what we're saying here is front left wheel, front right wheel, steer angle equals -15. So you might ask, well, let me pull this up out of the way and make it nice and tidy again. You might ask, why the negative? Well, because it's going to actually turn the wheel to the left to be a negative value. So it's going to turn it like this way, arc to the left. So we're saying, all right, hit that left turn button. Steer angle for the front and left wheels are going to turn left 15 degrees or whatever. Steer angle is a property of the wheel collider. So that's why we use that. So we're going to copy this because you can guess what's coming, our else if statement. And we're going to say, all right, so if it's ended, then we need the steer angle to be 0 on the wheel. So it's going to turn the wheel colliders 0 degrees, so they're going to stay straight if the touch phase is ended. So as soon as you take your finger up off that button, your wheels go straight again, car's driving straight. When you touch left turn button, they go -15 degrees around this way left. So you can imagine that we need to go down here and do the same tomfoolery down here, because we need to do the right turn button. And I'm trying to keep this short, but we're already at 20 minutes, and it's like I can only describe this so fast. So, alright, so for the right hand turn, we want it to be +15 degrees. And for touch phase ended, we want it to be 0 like the other one. +15 is going to turn the wheels this way, to the right. So therefore, we got a space here. Therefore, our check on the right turn button will turn 15 degrees to the right, all on the front left and front right wheels. So this is the code right here for all of our touches for gas, brake, left turn, right turn. Let me just double check everything. So there's the if for the gas, else for no gas, the if for the brake, else for no brake, if for the left turn, no left turn, right turn, no right turn. Hit Control S and save, and that right there should be the code we need. It shouldn't error, should be good. And like I said, we're actually, if you hit play, it's not actually going to work. It will work on a touch device, but it's not going to work now. We still have our control in there for the keyboard, so that's still working, but we're about ready to deal with that right now. Okay, so going over to touch control, I'm going to go and delete a lot of this empty space, keep it nice and tidy. We're going to go down here. So here's what we were doing our steering, right? So down here we were saying there's our front left wheel and front right wheel, dot steer angle, same attribute we have here. We're setting it to 10 and then multiplying it times input horizontal, which is like the left and right keys on the keyboard or the A and D keys on the keyboard. So basically that steer angle was 10. We can go and set ours down to 10 up here, but 15 is a pretty good steering angle. It's how sharp the wheel will turn. So basically what we want to do is // comment that out, because we already have input up here, you know, and we're already tweaking our steer angle with that input, so we don't need that. The one we want to keep here, though, is this front left wheel, front right wheel motor torque, and we want to keep that because we're actually just we're gonna keep it all this the same, except we don't want to multiply it times the horizontal, vertical input, which is the W and S or up and down keys. That was gas. Now we want to multiply it times our motor input touch, which is, this should all start sounding kind of familiar now, because we created that variable earlier up here, and we said, hey, if you're touching the gas button here, set that to 1. So, and if you're not, set it to 0. So here's our front left wheel and front right wheel motor torque, which is an attribute on the wheel collider, which basically is torque for a motor, turn the wheel. And we're saying that the power on the wheels to turn them equals engine torque, which is up here, and we haven't messed with that in this tutorial, but it's basically the horsepower of the car. It's torque. How fast can it go forward? And you can go and tweak that number in the inspector and make the car zip a little faster. We don't really need to mess with it. Down here we're saying, all right, so the motor torque on these wheel colliders is the engine torque divided by whatever gear it's in, which is normal. And now that's controlled by, multiplied by motor input touch, which is saying, all right, is that either multiplying it times 1, which means it's on, or multiplying it times 0, which means it's off. So right there, that's our input for gas right there. And we have our input for our steering up here, so we come in and out the steering down here. And that's basically everything. If we double check here, this is the motor torque is turned on and off with the motor input touch up here. Our steering angle is all controlled through the touches on left and right turn buttons up here. Hit Control Save, go back. Our script has all the new slots, and we filled them in earlier in the tutorial. So I think we're set really on that, and this will work when you get this. Build this to your Android or your iPhone device. You will have control on all of these buttons, and no more keyboard control working there. So we turn these back on. And then you just go in here and kind of, you kind of position these however you like. An important thing when laying out your GUI textures like this for, where you want them on the, wherever you want them on the screen, is I always remove all the pixel inset that comes on it, and you just move it using the transform alone up here. And you can tweak its opacity if you want it to be like a more dim. I think we might have shown you this already. You want it more dim or whatever. And so you can do that with all your buttons, position them where you like. And with the new code that you have on there, everything will work. These buttons will detect a touch. They'll detect when your touch is off of them. You'll completely control your vehicle in all ways using buttons on the screen with a touch on the iOS and the Android. So I hope this helps everybody. And have a good day.